Sam Brower accepted the case of an FLDS member in Utah who was being threatened with the loss of his home and his family for unspecified sins against the church. Sam didn't realize it at the time, but that case was the first step in a journey that has lasted over a decade, in which Sam has investigated, documented, and testified about the corruption and abuses of the FLDS church. Over that 10-plus year span, Sam has become more knowledgeable about the inner workings of the FLDS than possibly anyone outside the church. His work aided law enforcement officials in the ultimate capture and conviction of FLDS leader Warren Jeffs and many of Jeffs' senior leadership group. He has been a frequent guest on news programs about the FLDS and wrote the book Prophets Pray, which was the basis of the film we just watched. We are very fortunate to have him here with us today, so please join me in welcoming Sam Brower.
Well, thanks for having me here today. It's really a pleasure to be in South Dakota again. And I'm glad so many people have taken an interest in not only the film, but what's happening, not just here in South Dakota, but all over the country. You know, I think that's one of the mistakes people make and think that it's some kind of localized problem. But it's not. It's a problem all over the United States, and it affects everybody. It just so happens that this is one of the places where the rubber meets the road, and you know, it's kind of just one of those headquarters, hotbeds of criminal activity. Before I get started blabbing, I want to introduce Andrew Chapman. Andrew is my friend and one of the people who left the FLDS church when it was not popular to do so. I mean, without getting kicked off. He had the insight and the, I guess, dedication to see things go bad and decide that he's just going to leave. Welcome Andrew Chapman here today. Sorry, I forgot to press start. Also, I want to introduce, probably, you know, there's so many people throughout the past 10 or 11, it'll be 11 years next month that I've been working on these cases involving the FLDS in many different aspects, in every kind of crime and civil case and everything you can imagine, from kidnapping, rape, extortion, human trafficking, a myriad of child abuse crimes. And it's been a pleasure throughout those years to meet some of the finest people and some of the most courageous people that I've ever known. And I want to introduce Lynette Warner. Lynette, come on up, Lynette. Lynette is was one of Warren Jeffs' wives. And I hesitate to say wife because, you know, that's really not the case. It's just he picks certain women to have in his fold. And Lynette was one of two wives that have made it out of Warren's 80-something probably wives. The other one, yeah. The other wife that made it out was Janetta, and she was in the film. When when the film aired at Sundance, I was making my way out of the theater, and there were people talking to me and things, and this one lady kind of kept following me around, and finally she reached over and tapped me and said, "Sam, I just wanted to say hi, my name's Lynette." And I went, "What?" And I turned around, and she introduced herself. I'd been following her from a distance several years ago. She made her, I think it was like the third escape attempt, and she was in Short Creek at the time. One of the people you saw in the film, her name's Lori Chapman, saw this lady running through her backyard barefooted and went out to try and help and see what was going on, and it was Lynette. And she had been, if I remember properly, she had tried to escape before, and they had caught up with her. She had ended up back, and she ended up in a home where they had screwed the windows down shut and were literally holding her captive in the basement. And over a period of time, she was able to work the screws loose, get out to the basement window, and took off. Lori called me and told me about it, but I was probably here or someplace like that, and so I called some other people, and Lynette was able to make contact with a group that was known as the Hope Organization then, and came to get to know another person by the name of Kristen Decker. Kristen Decker is, she's, I guess you could say, Kristen's a polygamy survivor from another group called the AUB, Apostolic United Brotherhood, and she's written a book called 50 Years in Polygamy. She's also heads up a small charity that helps refugees and people needing help, women and children and men and boys leaving the FLDS and other polygamous groups. And that is what brought her and Lynette together. I've got to say, you know, it was fortuitous that happened at that time. I said when Lynette stopped me and said, "My name's Lynette," and we started talking, she said to me, well, I said to her, "Lynette, you are really courageous. You're only one of two that's ever made it out of there." And she goes, "No, I'm not courageous." I said, yeah, you are. You're really brave and courageous." And she said, no, I'm not. I said, yeah, you are. And she said, no, they were going to kill me. My life was in danger, and I had to leave. So I left. I wasn't courageous. I just knew I had to get out of there. And what happened, I'll just briefly explain it, and she can go into more details, but what happened was she was to, upset the apple cart in Warren Jeff's harem, I guess, and became too much of a irritant, outside influence on the other wives and Warren's family. And she was instructed that she needed to be blood atoned, which means that she needs to spill her blood or die. In other words, in order to gain salvation in the afterlife, she needs to make that conscious decision to end her life in this life. So she was instructed to do that herself. When she couldn't make that happen, they meaning Warren Jeffs and his cabal, were going to make that happen. And so she wisely got the hell out of Dodge. And so that's, and now Lynette, after all these years, is here talking to you, and that is a wonderful, huge thing to have her here. So I can sit here and I can keep babbling forever, but I know you all have a million questions of how, we could only just barely nick the surface in the film. There's so much going on, so I want to open it up to questions for everybody out here. Any questions?
Raise your hand. You have a question? Just raise your hand. Is it on? We'll bring the mic to you. Oh, okay.
Do they use emergency services like ambulance, fire, police, things like that? And does this group register to vote, which would be one of my big concerns for the county?
They have their own emergency services. They have their own police force. They have their own search and rescue, fire departments. They take advantage of every kind of government program you can think of. If there is, I remember a time they were doing bank rob. The town marshals were going to training to learn bank robbery, hostage negotiation skills because it was free. The government was putting it on for law enforcement. Well, they don't even have a bank in town. That bank closed up years ago. They are, I think, 2 or 3 in Arizona for Homeland Security grants, right behind Phoenix and I think Tucson. They've received hundreds of thousands of dollars in government. I take that back. They've received millions of dollars. They've built an airport out there with a huge runway on it from government grants. They have thermal imaging systems. They have, police cars, marshal cars that are decked out with all the latest, greatest things. They have satellite dishes in their cars. They've got everything. So yes, they do have their own emergency things. And if something happens, they're the ones that take care of it. They're plugged in to each other. They have their own dispatch. And they can hear what's going on with neighboring police agencies, but the neighboring police agencies can't hear what they're doing. So they're very high-tech and tuned into that. Andrew can probably tell you more about the voting and what's happening with that now. I think that mic works. Yeah. That's a microphone there.
The church will usually, in church, will tell the members how to vote and who to vote for, and they will go and do exactly that. So yes, they do have registered voters to make sure that things go the way they want. And to this gentleman's question, when these people move to other compounds across the country, that is a very real fear that every community has. Can they come in and take over? And technically, if Warden told them to, they could probably outvote you. So that's real.
Wow.
A follow-up, how many are estimated to be at this compound?
That's a good question. I've had discussions with Sheriff Doran in Texas about how many people were there. He swore there was 150 to 200. When that raid in Texas happened, and we get into some pretty good debates about it. And when that raid in Texas happened, they took out 463 just children, and that wasn't even all of them. That's not counting the adults, the mothers, the fathers. Actually, the fathers, as soon as that happened, they were in the wind. They took off and left the women there to handle that. So there were probably around 600 to 800 members out in Texas. This is smaller, and I don't know how many there are, but I do know they're very, very good at keeping themselves hidden and staying out. I mean, they know when planes are flying by, they have spotters. That's part of the reason they have that big guard tower out there. So they're very very keyed into being monitored from the outside world.
What can we do to help the people that are in the compound at Pringle?
That's the best question, and you know, we probably all have an answer for that, ways to help. You know, my answer to that is always awareness works. You know, being aware of what's going on and spreading the word. There is these little counties like in Arizona and Utah, like Mojave County is a small county in Arizona. It's spread out all over the place. Washington County is the other county they're in out there. And of course they're in Custer County and they're in Schlacker County. And they set up in small counties, small areas where they're going to be the least noticed and where they can do the best to skirt laws and not be caught doing it. And I can guarantee you that their gross national product, or whatever you want to call it, they're bringing in much more money than Custer County is. And so there's just no way that Custer County or Mojave County or Washington County can fight that kind of thing. They need help from the federal government, from the state's attorney general, from the governors. They need to not be silent. They need to be aware of what's going on and become involved and send the resources they need out there. And for instance, if there was a big drug problem in Chicago, they would start sending in, there'd be a groundswell of public outcries, you know, saying, we have this horrible drug problem in Chicago, and they would start bringing in special prosecutors and grand juries and undercover agents and attack the problem and do something about it. Well, the reason the FLDS sets up in these small communities is because they know that they don't have the resources or the manpower to handle that kind of a problem. So the biggest thing I see as a way to help is, and there's many ways, but is to start pressuring politicians and start pressuring state and federal agencies, especially the ones that have the deep pockets, because we aren't supposed to allow these things to happen here. We're not supposed to allow child abuse. I mean, we know what's happening. Warren Jeffs is in prison for life plus 20 for rape of a child. And so is all of his hierarchy. And that's just not supposed to happen here in America. And so it's really important that these politicians that are staying silent, and these, you know, attorney generals and large law enforcement agencies, the FBI and others are kind of sitting in the background, kind of trying to gauge what to do. Well, with the right pressure, the right public opinion, judges and politicians will begin to become more involved and make the right decisions. And I could go on about that, but I'll let Kristen and Lynette and Andrew say something about that as well.
Just be aware, because they are in your community, they have been known to drop boys off under a bridge, or, you know, like Lynette here, making a run for it. Just be aware that if you see something like that, try to get them the appropriate help as quickly as possible. So that's one thing that could be done.
When I ran away here in South Dakota, they called the police to look for me because I did succeed, but sorry. When I ran away from the compound here in South Dakota, they called the police, the people that were, I was in a car and I got out and ran away, and they called the police. And the problem that I came across was that I didn't have resources. I didn't know any resources to where I could like survive because I was threatened, and so I ended up calling my father's family back in Colorado City, Arizona, and so I didn't really get away all the way that time. And so I see as something as if there are things around that, you know, some kind of the organization, make sure the police force know if you're setting up something so that, you know, because there could have been a chance that I could have called them rather than my father's family and had something that I could have got out like 2 years earlier.
Okay. Yeah.
I really appreciate what Lynette said with that, because I too left polygamy years ago, 13 years ago, and I had gotten very involved in helping the girls because I knew that was an issue. I too would have, and probably could have left much sooner had there been people on the outside that I was aware of and what was happening. So I was so grateful to be able to start a coalition and help, and started speaking out about these very things that Sam's been talking about, is what can people do and what polygamy really looks like everywhere. And like Sam said, it is everywhere. It's not just the FLDS, the AB, and a lot of other groups that are just as crazy and just as dysfunctional in many ways. But what I could say about that is, too, that in order to help, we are always asking for funding and help. Holding Out Help is one of the biggest communities in it's located in Salt Lake area. And that group has done more for more people than we know about anywhere as far as helping with the housing and the programs and the organizations that they're doing. They are desperate for funding to help provide for the families and put the girls, anybody, children. We have women and children going there all the time, and we need housing. Up here, it would be nice to have the resources of somebody who said, in fact, just as we were driving up here, we said, it would be so nice to meet people who said, I'll take some people in, I'll be a safe house until we get you somewhere else or until you can be there. We need this communication to happen so that there are ways for girls when they need and want to leave that they can do it now and not have to go back or not have to fight with that. I'm going to hell anyway, and so I might as well just go back, or they'll leave thinking that as well. We could go on about that more later too, on resources.
There's really about 3 organizations right now that help, and that's the one Kristen's involved with, which is Sound Choices Coalition, and there's Holding Out Help, which is based in Salt Lake, and there's the Diversity Foundation, and each one kind of has their niche. All of them are trying to help refugees, people leaving the FLDS, and Diversity focuses on education. At any one time, they have probably 65 people either getting their GED or high school diploma or in college, and so there's people out there trying to help, but there's just not enough money. I'm not as involved in the after effects, I guess, sweeping up the mess. I'm more involved in surveillance, watching what's going on, being involved in lawsuits, gathering information and intelligence, and identifying who's who, in these groups, and keeping a spotlight on them. So everybody kind of has a niche where it's having an effect on them. And I would say within the next few months, actually, there's a good chance that there's going to be many, many more refugees coming out. And that's the worry here, is that we've gathered information that all the people out in Short Creek now, in Colorado City and Hilldale, have been required by Warren Jeffs to be off trust property, that's United Effort Plan Trust, the property that's been taken over by the court, and be on some kind of private ground by the first of the year, or they're going to be considered apostates and God can't use them. So there's going to be this big push, which it's going on now. There's construction going on in Short Creek to put trailer spaces on private property. There's big compounds being built near Kanab. There's different things going on around the country, and I have a feeling that South Dakota will be a place where there will be more of the elite refugees going on, and I suspect that there's probably more criminal activity going on here just because it's more established and it's a well-hidden place that there's very little access to. You can't see what's going on, and they're well hidden. And also Mancos, Colorado is another place that I suspect that there's going to be a lot going on. But Warren Jeffs has stated that God's calendar and man's calendar are 16 years off, and that by April of 2016, that's going to be the end of the world again, that there's going to be another lifting up. And so, I mean, he's done this many times, but there's a really big push now, and they're really believing that the end of the world's coming shortly. So that may have an effect here. So.
The thing that I found really fascinating was the FLDS-owned businesses and how they funnel money back to the church. What is the one in Pringle? What's their moneymaker? Do they own businesses there? How are they funneling money?
In the places like Pringle and Mancos and Texas, when it was still going. Texas, by the way, the Texas compound has been seized by the state in the same way that they would seize property or equipment or whatever from a drug runner, say. So the state has seized that entire compound there, and they're going to auction it off here before long. So they're out of there. The way they really don't have a income source per se in Pringle or in Mancos or the other places they probably have that we don't even know about. But what happens is there's all these worker bees, all these drones back in Colorado City and Hilldale who bring in all this money. I mean, I can't tell you how much money they bring in. There's a company called New Era manufactures aerospace parts. They manufacture the gun parts for certain gun companies. They are just a really huge manufacturing company. They have farming operations all over the country, huge farming operations, importing alfalfa hay to Japan and tomatoes growing in Arizona, and just huge, thousands of acres in farming operations. Construction is their main thing. They've built half of Vegas. They have construction infrastructure jobs going everywhere, on military bases, on government installations and facilities, all over the country. And they bring in literally millions of dollars a month to support the Pringle compound and the Mancos compound and the other places where the more elite are staying. And these drones are the workers that go out and are securing their salvation by bringing as much money as they can into the organization.
I have a question. What does the FLDS do with all this? You look at all the compounds in the FLDS, the very meager lifestyle. People working all day long and 52 hours a week. So where does all that money go? What do they do with this money? It doesn't take that much to support a compound.
Yeah, it does take a lot to support it. But think of a 10,000, say a 10, 20,000 square foot house, and how many thousands of dollars it takes just to run that house. Then think of, Warren Jeffs has somewhere around 80 wives he has to feed and take care of and house. Then he has all the children that go along with that, and that's just one person. When you magnify that into the thousands, that's a lot of people to take care of. Right now, every penny that somebody makes is donated to the FLDS organization. And Warren doles that out in what they call their just wants and needs. So if there is somebody that's not high up on the totem pole, for instance, some of the widows that Andrew supplies with food, they literally start wasting away and starving. Whereas the big shots are driving around in huge four-wheel drive trucks, living in big mansions, and living a really opulent lifestyle. It's not a meager lifestyle, unless you're on the bottom of the totem pole. Warren Jeffs, Rule and Jeffs would fly around in Lear jets. They travel the country with not a care of where the money goes to. They had those 2 motorcycles you saw in there were $50,000 a piece, custom-made motorcycles, Harley Davidsons. So they, you know, it's when you magnify what they're doing by thousands of people, and you consider the construction costs, the legal costs, which are, I mean, their legal costs run into thousands of dollars a day. They're being pursued right now by the Department of Justice, by the Department of Labor. They just lost a lawsuit by Ron and Ginger Cook, and they spent millions of dollars defending that. They even set up shell companies and shelf companies, we call them, just like any other mob organization does, to launder the money through these organizations. So, you know, to look at, you know, the town there and see some of these rundown houses and think that's the way it is kind of a misleading. Many of the leaders live a very opulent lifestyle. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
I think that I would like to say a lot of the young boys, and you saw the child labor, and that's what's happening too. The men that run the businesses are able to underbid all of the men, especially in southern Utah and everywhere they work, all over Utah actually, up here even in Dakotas, they're able to undercut and underbid so many of you because they have child labor. And the men are willing, they've been told by Warren, donate everything, donate everything. So they're willing, they can go in and bid a job for half of what most of the construction people can do, the contractors can do. And so therefore they're getting a lot of the jobs. People everywhere are getting them, not only them, but they've been working since they're children, babies. And so they do a good job. They know what to do and they know how. So they really do know how to mass produce and monopolize your systems, our systems. And it's really getting freaking scary.
They're very good at it.
How are they, I would assume with these very sophisticated companies that their people have to get an education, I would assume the demand. But you'd have to have accountants and engineers, and where are they sending their people to get the...
That's what you'd think, but they don't. Most of the children there are lucky if they get an 8th grade education. Diversity that helps that, the foundation that helps them get an education has done a lot of testing. Most make it through 8th grade, or not most, some make it through 8th grade, but even the ones that make it through 8th grade still only have the equivalent of a 2nd, 3rd grade education. The boys are taught how to read a tape measure and then they're put out on a job. Girls are taught how to take care of, I mean, Warren Jeffs has said no toys are allowed. Warren Jeffs has said in his sermons and his revelations that if a girl wants to play with a doll, give her a baby. If boys want to ride a bicycle, give them a shovel. So there is no, I mean, there's very little joy in their lives there. They work, and that's it. And the education consists mainly of church history and church doctrine, indoctrination. There are people in the past, there were people that they would send to college for specific things, like they had 2 doctors. They made it through medical school. Dan Fisher was somebody they sent to dental school, but they found that by doing that, Dan Fisher went to dental school and he got out into the real world and turned into one of their biggest thorns in their side by starting Diversity Foundation, which hired me to begin with. So as far as education goes, it's minimal at best, and they teach what they need to know. All these things that they do, these high-tech things with cameras and phones and all that kind of stuff, are acquired, self-taught things that they look at giving these assignments as a religious calling. And so if they don't know it, they'll figure it out. They'll do what it takes to figure it out. And that's how their educational system works.
I understand too, really quickly, to add, if that's okay, Sam, is that some of the men did have, that were converts, and the FLDS took very few converts over the years, but some of those men did, and women did come in with some education. So they counted on those people that had the money. They were only allowed in if they had lots of money, like you saw in the movies.
The other thing is Warren has recently kicked out anybody that's educated. All the
So,
nurses, all the
right.
doctors.
Yeah, he asked them to leave.
Education have all been kicked out.
But so the learning came only from them, and as you can tell, it just gets diminished more and more and more. So it's, again, just created self-taught, hopefully.
It's sort of like creating this concentrated group of zealots. And that's kind of what's being gathered together now.
They have to have engineers.
What's that?
They have to have engineers and computer technicians and people like them.
They had an engineering company, and the guy had he was licensed in certain states where you don't have to have a degree, and he was a good engineer, good architect. But there's not a lot of them, and again, he's self-taught. He's given that as a religious calling assignment, and they figure it out.
If you'll wait for me to come around with the mic, then everyone will be able to hear your questions. So I just want to say that I've got one here, and then I'll make my way around.
Their school books are like really old, and they're edited, so there's no like talk of movies or talk of internet or anything like that in them. And
Black kids.
yeah, and they like, I taught school there. We rotated our schedule, and one of the things that we did was teach school. So if you get a mother, the mothers are required to teach their children. As much, they say what you can teach is better than not knowing anything. But so I've noticed through the years that the education actually gets less and less, because whatever the mother retains is what she teaches her child, and that repeats, but the mother doesn't retain like everything that the mother before did, so it does get less and less.
Okay, assuming a positive outcome where the Pringle compound is shut down, how can the state and the local area prepare for that to help the people that are being processed out of that?
I mean, I can only give my opinion, and that is just like any other refugee situation, just like what's happening now with Syrian refugees. There's going to be this kind of flood of people that have like almost no life skills, that don't know how to exist very well outside of their culture. And they're going to need help with all the things that any other refugee needs: housing, education, jobs, and that's how it will help. To have something like that in place. Right now, it wouldn't take that much work to get something like that going. But to do it just like that, when something happens, would be much harder. And I'm sure that there's people like Kristen and Tanya Toole and all these, and the people at Diversity that would be willing to help set that up and help people here learn from their experiences and get something like that going.
What we've been doing is taking, so a lot of people will email us or call us, they've heard about our organization and or Tanya's or the others, and they'll say, I want to help, what can I do? And then we say, what do you want to do? What can you do? Please send us all your information you can. And then we do background checks. We're establishing we need more of that help too. This is why we need so much money, because they cost money. We need more volunteers to help run things and make things everywhere. Everywhere we need safe places here. So for an example, if officers would call us, me or Tanya or someone else, and say, we have somebody, we need some help. We have a number right now, we can call you and say, here's a person in a safe house, please take them there, and they'll be safe for a while until they can stay and or be moved to another location. A lot of time, we have a mom we're working with right now who has 18 children. And I want you to know the average woman from the FLDS community has 12 to 18 children. From the group I was from, the average is 8 to 15 children. And so this is common, very common. They might be leaving with children or without, but we really do need support in every way possible. Legal, if there's any lawyers, that's desperate for that, because a lot of moms are leaving without their children, and that's devastating to them. They can hardly function at that point. We want to send them to school, but I can't function because I don't have my kids with me. They've been taken by the money, the people who have the money to pay the lawyers that keep them there. So that's, I could go on.
We just helped 3 women get their 16 children out of Short Creek. And that's a legal undertaking. Getting legal custody, the mothers getting legal custody of their children. Most of them haven't seen their children in several years. It was about 3 years for those 3 women. And they're grown up, and they actually despise their parents, their mothers, for taking them away. They've been so indoctrinated. And so the mothers can't go to work, because if they leave the children, they'll destroy the home, they'll take off and run away, they've been taught to run back to them. So they have to stay home and kind of nurse their children along. One of the mothers was literally black and blue. Her kids came in with Leatherman pliers and broke 2 of her toes while she was sleeping. Another mother, you may have seen, her name's Sabrina, on 2020, and her oldest son, who is the priesthood authority in the home, he's like 16 years old, took the garden hose, put it in the gas tank of the car and filled it up with water, cut the cable on their TV set and put a rock through the $2,000 brand new TV set that she had just bought. And the mother can't leave them alone. They have to be there. And so that takes up a lot of resources from everybody. And not to mention the legal process. I mean, Roger Houle is an attorney that I work with and have been from the beginning, actually. And he essentially donates much of what he does, and so do I. It's, I haven't received a paycheck in 6 years, I think, for doing this stuff. So it's something that's being done because you can't turn your back on it. And it would be, it's great to have resources to buy gas with or something like that. So that's always a concern, being able to fight this giant.
I'm Donna Talley with Weave here in Custer, the women's shelter, and we are a resource. The FBI came to see us before Warren Jeffs was arrested when he was on the FBI's most wanted list, and they went through our shelter, and we are a resource. I can't confirm or deny that we've helped anybody, but if you would be able to, share that we would be able to assist the people, and we would be able to help y'all help all over the state or wherever that they need to go.
Well, that's excellent, and you need to talk with Kristen afterwards.
nitpick then, John. I was wondering what happens to the special needs children that are born?
I'll let you guys answer that. I'll just say real quick, there's...
In Colorado City, Arizona, they do have a lady that has a school and everything for special needs, and she has done classes and things. I took her classes, and I don't know the difference yet of what they teach out here and what she teaches, because I want to become a psychologist and help people from where I came from, but I haven't got that far to know the difference yet. But she does teach a class in Colorado City.
A long time ago, they were letting a lot of, I know this personally from stories, women that I've heard personally from, that a lot of times the babies that were born from the intermarrying, and which is huge in most polygamous sects everywhere, even the one I'm from has started marrying relatives now in the last 10, 15 years. Before that they didn't, but so there's a lot of babies that are afflicted from that and have major disabilities, and originally they would let some of the babies just die instead of taking them in, especially if it was siblings, married to siblings, or close relations, because they were afraid, you know, of laws coming in and government and so forth. But then they realized in the last, and I have a cousin who gave me a lot of this first-hand information because she works with the children with disabilities, and she said that in the last, say, 15 years, they have realized that the children are commodities, and like Sam said, they get a lot of funding from children with disabilities. They're, you know, a lot of money coming from the services that they get, and if you have a child with disabilities, you get extra food stamps. If you have a child with disabilities, you get this and this and this. I'm not saying they shouldn't have it, but that's what happens. So you realize the babies are, they need to keep them and keep them alive and help them survive. You don't see a lot of them though. That's one of the things too, is a lot of the mothers have been told that it's their fault, they're evil, that you wouldn't have had a baby with a disability if you were more worthy and kind. And in most cases, it is the women's fault for everything that goes wrong. So,
many women have been kicked out.
Because of,
it used to be that women were rarely kicked out of the FLDS. Now it's gotten to the point where if they've outlived their usefulness, if they're past their childbearing years or something, or they're just too much of a irritant for the group, or whatever the case may be. Warren Jeffs has come up with this thing now that certain women are killers of unborn babies. And when he says that, he's saying that either they had a miscarriage or they had sex while they were pregnant and admitted to it. And so Warren Jeffs considers that a murder. He considers it murder. And so he'll kick these women out that have become a liability instead of an asset to the community. And that's something that's fairly new, that's been going on in the past 2 or 3 years, and become more and more common lately. He's even, I mean, he's just so crazy. He's even kicked out women that are dead. And so it's, you know, it's a really weird thing going on now with those kinds of issues. And I'll just say that there's a disease called Fumarase disease. And it's a very debilitating genetic disease. And Short Creek, that area, has 90% of the world's population of Fumarase disease. And it's caused from inbreeding. And so many of the defects are a result of that disease.
It seems to me there should be a way to stop this by boycotting their companies that they're going around and making all this money. Why are we supporting these companies that they have?
That's, you know, that is a great question. I get people saying, just last time I was doing a Q&A on the film, somebody said, if we hire FLDS workers to build our house, are we supporting the FLDS? And I just felt like going, what do you think? I said, it's like going to the Texas State Prison and putting money on Warren Jeff's commissary account.
So everybody that hires them knows that they're
the government will say, the government that hires them to work on military bases and things like that will say, well, it's, they meet the bid requirements, they were low bidder, so they get the job. But we can boycott them. We can say, we're not going to hire them, we're not going to be a part of that. And by raising hell with the government, saying, oh, okay, you mean to tell me you're going to hire this organization who the leader of this organization, the president of their religious corporation, is doing life plus 20 years? I mean, if there's enough pressure put on the government, I promise you that they'll back away from that. Oh, they're the low bidder, so they met the requirements.
We just recently listed on the coalition website, and I can give you that site, the contact information, but we just recently listed all of the Kingston group. They're one of the most powerful, rich, wealthy, abusive, horrible, polygamous sects in Utah. And yeah, it's another similar story. We just listed all of their businesses for this very purpose, and we've been working on recently compiling the list for the FLDS community. And I learn more everywhere I go to, and I'm going, oh yeah, duh, sounds the source on getting more of those than what we already have. So it's sound-choices.com, that easy. And then our Facebook page where we post all kinds of information Sam's doing and everything he does and everything everybody else is trying to do. Because ours is more of an informational site, and what I do is speak out too about polygamy. But what we are doing on there is you can go to the Facebook site and just go Sound Choices. I believe that's it, just Sound Choices. And you'll see a lot of postings that you can read up on things every day and on where Sam's at, where he's putting his shows and what's happening.
You may have heard of a large company called Washaki. It's a huge Washaki. It's a huge energy company worldwide, and that's a Kingston-run company.
$1 million income for them, and the money came from grant money. It wasn't even their money in the first place. It's like you said, they tap into everything they can take from all of you and all of us.
I was just wondering if all these women are receiving welfare benefits.
One of the things that, after the raid in Texas, there was this big outcry that there's not a single woman receiving money from the state of Texas, and that was true. There wasn't. They were receiving it from Arizona and Utah and just taking it over there. That's one of the, I mean, they will hone in on any scam they can think of. The earned income credit, for instance, if a father has several wives and a bunch of children, the wives can claim an income and take out the earned income credit. One of the people in prison, actually, Merrill Jessup, one of Warren's counselors, received, I think it was something like $125,000 one year, just off the earned income credit, because all the wives claim an income, and the way they do it is the husband says that he's paying the wives a salary for cleaning the home and all this kind of stuff, and they're not legally married to them. So they take out the earned income credit. They have people that come around from home to home to home, help them with their taxes so that they can do that, and when the check comes, they come and get the check from them. It's horrible. And as far as welfare goes, it's the same kind of thing. Many women, and it's mostly the poorer families that are already giving everything they have.
I knew one lady who went and asked the bishop, if he was like Lyle, and he asked him if she was supposed to get on food stamps, and he said, well, that's all that we have in our storehouse where they store the food is people's food stamps. We don't go buy groceries.
Tell them what they do with the credit cards and stuff, Andrew.
We're going to touch on a subject that's a little bit off base from what we're talking. But what we need to do is catch up to speed on what they're doing right now. They require everybody to turn in 100%. So they went through their homes and itemized every little thing they had. And anything they weren't using in a month, they had to turn it into the storehouse. And if you needed it, then you had to reapply with this little paper that's supposed to be gone expired, and they give you instructions on how to fill it out. And then you apply for what you've already turned in. And it goes for the food stamps too, and the credit cards and stuff. They go out there and they get credit cards, max them out for the church, and then go file bankruptcy. And then the food stamps, if you go to Walmart or Costco down there, you'll see a lady that comes in and buys one item. Just cartloads of, 4 or 5 cartloads of one item. And she pays with it with food stamps. Well, the bishop will send these ladies with all these food stamps to go get a particular item to fill the storehouse with. And everybody in the community has to apply to get something. They're just wants and needs.
One of my cousins was just kicked out because she wouldn't give her credit card to them. So not only are they asking people to go max out their credit cards, if you won't do it, then you better give it to us so we can. And she wouldn't give them the credit card, so they asked it her.
How do we put them out of business?
Yeah.
Like I said,
Let's get to the top of this thing.
Awareness. I mean, raising hell about it. That's why the film's so important. That's why I'm here right now.
Well, I've got one suggestion. Our Attorney General, Marty Jackley, is going to run for governor, it appears like. Let's all give him a call. Anybody who's running for office, let's give him a call.
That's the way it's done.
Here's an example of what doesn't work.
Okay, hello. My turn. I've got 3 things. First of all, I want to thank David and Vera and Charlie and Norma for setting this whole thing up. I want to thank you guys for coming. Secondly, I wish there was somebody from Custer County up on that stage that we could ask questions to. That'd be interesting. But thirdly, if the county and the state are doing nothing about this, about the compound in Pringle, do you know of any legal opening the citizens could take with the legal task force to do something against that compound?
Tell me how you word that to me again. Ask me that question again.
Okay, if the state and the county are doing nothing against the compound legally, can citizens, can we form a legal task force and do something? Is there an opening, any kind of an opening legally that we could use against the compound to shut them down?
Well, I don't know about shut it down. You need an opportunity. I mean, to shut it down, you need what they did in Texas. We were talking about it earlier. In Texas, just by a fluke, this woman who had severe emotional problems made this call. She really had nothing to do with the FLDS, but she believed she did. And she identified a perpetrator and a victim, gave names. And that, by law enforcement has to go in and check that out. So they had an opportunity to go on the ranch and start checking that out. When they did, they were able to start building their probable cause and find things going on. So what it takes from a legal standpoint is for somebody within the group or somebody that's been a victim of a crime to start talking about it. That's on the local level. On the higher levels, and I believe that there's a lot of concern here in the state. I've been brought in the years past and done law enforcement briefings with Sheriff Wheeler and with South Dakota Bureau of Investigation and the FBI and federal prosecutors and state prosecutors. And I believe that there's a lot of concern and a lot of worry about what could happen out there. And I feel that just like, in fact, I probably feel that here, more than Mancos, Colorado, or some of the other places, that law enforcement is preparing for some sort of eventuality. That being said, as I said earlier, it's going to take resources. So you have to start getting up there on the state attorney general level, the governor level, the federal level, and put heat on them to start doing what they need to do. I mean, there could be surveillances, and you know, for all I know, they're doing that. I just don't know. If they are, they're probably not going to tell anybody. But keeping that awareness, keep making that noise, keep it in front of the attorney. The attorney general is the chief law enforcement officer of the state. In Utah, our new attorney general invited me down, had me show the film to all of his staff, everybody in his office. He showed up at one of the screenings and answered questions on a panel like this. Because he's taken an interest because of the groundswell of public opinion and public interest in it. And so that's what it's going to take. And so they start getting more people involved, and more things begin to happen, so that when that break comes, when somebody needs help, when a crime is committed, they can be prepared and ready to just go after it. And again, the best thing you can do is, I mean, government officials are slaves to you. If you express your disdain for their silence, they're going to be forced to do something. They're going to be forced to become more involved. So that's my recommendation.
The coalition is taking a stronger stand probably than Sam is able to do or wants to do. I don't know where Liz is personal on. But the coalition, I started the Sound Choices Coalition because in Utah there was a whole bunch of women that were out there, and men, a whole bunch. And they were out there propaganda saying how wonderful polygamy is, how perfect Warren is. He didn't do anything wrong. Everybody's great. And we're all happy, so leave us alone. They were really at the AG's office doing this. And I was leaving and knew the dysfunction and craziness within my own community, let alone what was going on in the FLDS community, because I have hundreds of relatives all over both places. And I said, somebody has to speak out. They have to know this is not okay. This is not the truth. This is not what's really happening. That these women, it's about, so personally, we're saying, this is not about choice. This is not a religious freedom. It's not about choice at all. From like Sam said, the babies are born into, he described that. That's what we were told we had to do, or we were going straight to hell. So what we are doing is advocating for people to, in Canada, I'm going to try to be really fast and brief, in Canada, they did what they call the court case reformation, and they decided to keep polygamy illegal there. And the reason is because in a nutshell, they did a whole year of court, that polygamy is a religious right, yes, but the harms of polygamy, like you said, killing, murdering, blah, 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 and abuses, far outweigh this religious right, so no, sorry. The laws are going to say that polygamy will remain illegal in the United States, as it always has been and should be. And that was the bottom line in Canada. And I know that people say, well, that's their choice, leave them alone, that's their right, that's their religion. This is something that we're seeing is, you know what, there might be a few people, it might look like that anyway, I disagree, but there might be a few that are happy. And so, but the laws are made to protect you and me and us and all those women and children that are being held and locked in. So we're not saying break them up, though we don't want to break up families, we never advocate that. But what we are asking is that the laws are changed and stay, and you say, no, we don't want polygamy, it's not okay. And so after today, or whenever the lawyers and legal people say, okay, that's it, this is the time to end it, okay, from now on, we'll give what do they call, amnesty to those that are living it, but after this day, we will not allow it anymore. We'll go in for polygamy and end this so that it doesn't continue to go on. In the 7 generations, I was a 7th generation polygamist, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse and more crazy and more insane and more deformed babies. So now I said my spiel. Sorry to take
one of the biggest, probably the biggest mistake that people can make is to look at FLDS and these other groups as a religion. It's not a religion. And so I try not to ever say church, because it's not a church. It's a criminal syndicate. Churches don't have every single member of their hierarchy in prison for raping little girls. So that's the biggest thing that politicians and government officials and things like that need to get in their mind is, and the public too, is that this is not about religion. This is about a crime syndicate committing and getting away with a myriad of crimes that any one of us would be hooked up and hauled off to jail for. And so the approach needs to be the same way that the government cracked down on the mafia. It may never go away, and the mafia is still out there, but they certainly hurt them bad, and they realize the problem, and they can take action towards it. And so it may be a long-standing, ongoing fight, but it's a fight that needs to happen because we don't tolerate child abuse in this country.
One of the things that I really stress, and I don't know how to solve it all, but is the solitary confinement. Like when I was locked up, so I know, and I've heard stories of others that they were locked up in solitary confinement for 9 months. One lady was in there for 9 months. And I can see how it would be kind of hard when you're inside of there to even find a phone, because how do you drive off the land to call people because they're worried about being tapped in, and to be able to make the call to the people that they need to make it to. So I don't know what the solution is, but I hope that somebody comes up with something to help those victims that are in solitary confinement. Yeah. Because I've heard there's many.
Does that sound like a religion?
Andrew, I'd like you to kind of describe what we talked about last night when you were talking about the corruption of the whole family structure and the dissipation. You made it almost sound like it was a cattle breeding operation rather than a family.
Some of the things that Warren's done out of the prison, and this is quite recent, like in the last 2 years, he's annulled all marriages. And so nobody's married, so they have the men turned into caretakers. And he also had all the parents sign the children over before a notary on a piece of paper over to the church. And so these children are separated from their siblings, and they're being grouped up. And 12 boys over here, 12 girls over here, into different homes, but they're not being raised together as brothers and sisters anymore. Or by the parents. And then the other thing that he's done is, along with destroying the family unit, is he's created church children. And with this, he's taken all the any adult ladies that will participate, and there's been some that hasn't, but he set aside 15 men to get all the girls pregnant. And so the men are just caretakers, the women are vessels for the church, and the children are being church children in massive numbers now.
They're property of the priesthood.
Right, property of the church.
We don't even know if those girls are adult girls. One of my cousins is suspicious that her 17-year-old girl was forced to participate because Warren invited the women back after they qualified and went through an extensive interview to see if they were pure and perfect. And then he had an edict that all these women that were pure and perfect were to be impregnated by these elite men, seed bearers.
And you got a little bit of that in the film with Marianne. We've taken some heat for putting that little tiny bit in the film, but and what happens is it's carried out ritualistically. It's just ritualistic abuse. And it's done on an altar bed, like was kind of shown in the film, or you heard in the film. And the reason we thought it was important to do that, even though it's so vile and disgusting, is because when I first found out about that, people didn't believe it. Krakauer went on CNN and said, we have documents showing that a 12-year-old little girl has been ritualistically raped in Texas. And we were catching hell from other media sources and polygamy groups and everyone, you name it, saying that that couldn't be happening. If something like that was happening in America, they'd be arrested. Well, there's the tape. And I'll tell you, in Texas, when Warren was on trial, that was just, a few seconds. There was probably an hour and a half or more of that kind of stuff, not only with that little girl, but with others, in orgy-type settings. The jurors, there were 12 jurors, they had speakers set up around the courtroom so that the people in the court could hear, and the jurors were given headphones. And after the first 5 minutes or so, just about all the jurors had the headphones off, and many were just sobbing to hear that. So we took the chance when the film was made, and we felt it important to give people just a little feel for what happens, to those children in that culture. So.
Why is any communication from Warren Jeffs being let out? Why can't there be some way of stopping him from sending his directions, his edicts, his directions to his marshals or his bishops or whatever? And can we find out who their attorneys are so we can boycott the attorneys or picket the attorneys' offices, saying that they're basically enabling child rape?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's one of the law firms that has represented the FLDS for decades. It's called Snow, Christensen and Martineau. And they have a longtime attorney by the name of Rod Parker who's defending them. My publisher got a nasty letter from him when I wrote the book, before the book ever came out. And they hire the best attorneys money can buy. And that's what criminal organizations do. They take in a lot of money and they buy the best attorneys money will buy. And by best, I don't mean they're good attorneys, they're good at what they do, but they're also what I consider some of the most unethical attorneys there are, and will do just about anything. There's the ones representing the city right now are what I just consider hired guns. The guy's name's Blake Hamilton on the Utah side and Jeff Matura on the Arizona side. They're not like they're not like a normal city attorney or county attorney that has an office at the city offices or something like that. They're part of a large law firm that are just hired guns, and so they're very good at that. As far as communication from prison, I agree with you 100%. Warren Jeffs should be locked down in Supermax in Colorado and never have any human contact again. He's causing so much damage from his prison cell there that it's just unbelievable. He's released 3 volumes of hardbound books of his revelations to the people there since he's been in prison that are just the most bizarre things you can imagine, and just running the show from prison. And people that do that, if you're in the mob, that's where they put you, Supermax. And that's what he is. He's part of the mob. So he's in maximum security. He's locked down 23 hours a day. He gets out for 1 hour to take a shower, exercise, or make a phone call. He gets 240 minutes a month, which is the equivalent of 15 minutes every other day. And he can send and receive as much mail as he wants. And he has attorneys coming to visit him all the time that sneak things in and out of the prison. So, he's in prison on state charges. I'm not sure what the process would be to have him put away in a federal Supermax prison, but certainly something that I feel needs to happen, and maybe that's, you know, part of that groundswell of public opinion that could make that kind of difference.
I think everybody should send letters from the whole United States and just overwhelm them. We're sick of that. We're sick of him. That we're also listing on the coalition all of the lawyers and all of the people that have helped people. Like, for an example, we have a commissioner right now who, from the All Right group. She's one of my cousins who's trying to leave, and she has 7 or 8 kids, and they have all the money in the world to keep her kids away from her. The man, her ex-husband's abusive. He's had 5 or 6 wives leave him, and he still has some because he's that abusive. And yet the judge, the commissioner, sent those children back with him to be raised by him, while the other wives, they gang up on each other, on the one who's leaving, and they say, she's the bad one, she's the evil one, she's the one who didn't conform and didn't do what she's not a good mother. So the commissioners or the judges believe them, and also they have the money. So this is another dilemma we're always fighting with and trying to deal with. So we need, again, that's why we're just begging for help, for pro bono lawyers and people who know what they're doing, family law and so forth. But what you can do is, like you said, I appreciate that, boycott anybody in any business and any people who are supporting that. Don't vote for the judges and commissioners that send kids back to the polygamous groups, because that's what they're going to be raised to deal with.
Okay, I'm afraid everybody's going to start glazing over pretty soon, so no, it's not you. So I don't know how much time we have. Maybe
one more, maybe one more question.
Okay, yeah.
We had an opportunity recently to put a pinch down on them. They applied for a well permit that the water board had to say yes or no to. All it would have taken would be 3 people on the water board to say no.
Yeah,
the governor knew about it, the lieutenant governor knew about it, the attorney general knew about it, the director of the Department of Agriculture knew about it. We know of at least 60 letters that were sent saying it is not in our interest.
That's right.
We just need more folks to be aware of there are these opportunities locally, whether it's the planning commission, where they need to hear our voice. So that and they, you know, we could have stopped that.
It's shameful that went through.
That's right.
And I'm not saying that there are payoffs here, but we know of many, 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 many. They have all the money in the world. And I promise I'm not accusing anybody here of that. But I know it's happened before because of situations like, where was the vote? What? We sent all those letters. What does this look like? Nobody's listening to us.
I was actually taken aback when I heard that had been approved. It looked like it was not going to be. And then all of a sudden it just flipped.
Yep.
And it rocked me to hear that happened.
Us too.
And I don't know what happened, but I've seen that scenario happen in the past 11 years over and over again. And that's really where public opinion can make a difference.
I have 2 more questions.
Okay.
One for Lynette. Are there women or boys on the Pringle compound that would like to get out if there was a way?
I know that there are people in solitary confinement, but I don't know if they're too hurt, you know? Like, I don't know for sure if they want out, because I've learned since I've got out that you create brain waves, you know, to survive. And sometimes it's not good when you actually, you know.
Sure.
So I don't know. I don't know for sure if they want out, but I think that it should be something that we should account for everybody. We should try it, because the families are all split up and they practice split atonement, and so everything is, you know, if somebody turns up missing, they just think they're in the other house. I think that they should be accounted for, and see if they, you know, somebody should figure out a way to ask them.
There's no record keeping, real record keeping, you know. Some children have birth certificates. I know a guy that's 55 years old that just barely got his birth certificate. So there's none of that, and it's sort of like, you know, there's the devil you know and the devil you don't know. Sure. And so when they're in that situation, they're thinking that, okay, they're in hell right now, but it's better than the hell that's out there, you know, because that's what they've been taught and they know. So like Lynette says, there really needs to be some kind of accounting and accountability for what goes on, especially in closed, secretive compounds like that.
Yeah.
One of the things that occurs to me is that it's power versus power. How does the Mormon Church itself view this? I mean, they certainly have resources that are equal to the task. Have they been engaged in the process of trying to limit the activities of the FLDS?
And I should probably answer that. Everybody's looking at me because I'm LDS. Yeah, I'll say yes, the LDS Church should be involved in doing that, and so should the Catholic Church, and so should the Jewish community and the Protestant community, and everybody. One thing that makes it difficult for, well, any religious organization, but especially the LDS Church, is that the FLDS and other polygamous groups despise them because they were kicked out, you know, over a century ago. And so they have this thing about the LDS Church being the most horrible institution in existence. And, you know, as far as, this is just my opinion, I don't profess to speak for the LDS Church, but they look at them just like any other religion. You know, they're outraged and disgusted by the pedophile Catholic priests, and they're outraged and disgusted by the underage brides and all the things that are going on out there. So yes, you know, the LDS and all these other religions need to become more involved and contribute more and do more. And the hope is that, you know, that can happen. Again, that's part of public opinion and being a part of involving everybody in your sphere of influence.
I think there'd be a lot of women who want to get out and want to leave, and the reason I believe that is I don't think that sometimes they know it, but when I got out and was able to have my cognitive skills back and got some therapy and help and moving on in my life, I realized that I always wanted to leave. I just didn't know how. I didn't know how to think about it, didn't know how, and like Sam said, if I leave, I'm going straight to hell, so I might as well stay because I'm not going to get to be with my family. I think there's a lot of women who, if they could get out and have that help and support and love, somebody walk them through it and help them, that they would realize what freedom and joy is, and that's where I'm at, that's where we're at. It's never been so precious. Freedom is just amazing.
Yes, I would like to thank all of you people up there, Kirsten, Annette, and Andrew, for you being here today to bring to a lot of people who are ignorant about what has gone on and what is going on in the FLDS unit, especially here right in our county. And Lynette, I would like to ask you, what happened that triggered you to know, I want to escape. I want to get out here, because there's a lot of times those types of bits of information are the thing that can be, I mean, we heard about some of the things in World War II where leaflets and pamphlets were dropped. Well, that's not going to happen, but the bottom line is, what triggered you?
Well, the main thing that triggered me was I got harassed really bad, and they were teaching me a new language using the English language. And it's not well out, you know, there's not very many people that have survived it, that have been able to talk about it. But I refused. I said I don't want to teach the children that because it deprives them of their freedom, so when they do escape, they won't know how to communicate. That's why I want to go into psychology, so I can help them communicate when they get out.
That's commendable, and I hope you accomplish your goals. And they're trying to get the mic away from you now. But I have one more comment or statement or question, and this would be to you, Sam. With the water board passing that permit for them to get their water permit, don't you think it would be a good investigation to see if there was anything that was unethical that went on with that water board behind the scenes that nobody on the surface could ever, observe or find out? Maybe they're all driving brand new big one-ton trucks now.
Well, that's kind of what I was trying to say without saying it.
Well, I apologize. I shouldn't have said it.
Because they always seem to find a way to make those kinds of things happen. I know that the former Attorney General in Utah was offered large sums of money to decide things their way. And there's witnesses, he's under indictment now in Utah, along with the person passed the baton on to. And the current Attorney General is in charge of prosecuting them. I believe that there's been other things happen over the years where public officials have been gotten to some way, whether it's campaign contributions, finding out what their weaknesses are or their strengths, and being able to feed those in certain ways. And if one vote can make the difference, that's all they need. All they need to do is find one in. And that's, when I tell you that they consider whatever task they've been given as a religious calling, their salvation is tied to that. Their families are tied to that. Their children are tied to that. If they fail, they lose everything. They lose their salvation. They lose their wives. They lose their children. They lose their livelihood. They lose their big-ass four-wheel drive pickup. And so when they're given a task of finding a way to make that water board change their mind or flip somebody on the board, they're going to do their very best to make that happen. And I don't know that anything like that happened, but I certainly don't put it past them, and I suspect something like that happened. Like I said, I was taken aback by it.
Yeah, so was I.
Okay, I've got the mic now, so I think it's time to wrap things up, but we certainly appreciate everybody being here today. And Sam and Steve. It can't be easy for them to do this, and we really appreciate it. Also, don't forget the donation bucket when you go out, otherwise David and I are going to be doing part-time or something here, because we really did this on hope and a prayer, and hope our prayers are answered, so we don't have to pay for all of this, because there were some considerable expenses involved in getting Sam and these folks here from Salt Lake City. Again, thanks so much for being here. And you heard the message about giving, now you should know that Governor and Linda Dugard were invited, along with Attorney General Marty Jackley and the head of social services in Pierre. All these people were invited, along with our local legislators, Rambleburg Senator, Representative Vercio, and Representative Russell. I only heard back from Senator Russell that he had a conflict and couldn't be here. Otherwise, I'm sure he would be here. But all these other people, where are they? Where are they? Because this is our state. This is our county. And how many county people were here today? Our sheriff told me yesterday that he'd rather talk to you one-on-one about this. So I'm not telling you what to do, but... Okay, thanks again for being here. We really appreciate you.